This will be a short video on the different distribution patterns that we see in nature. You can find this information on page 93 of your book, and the notes, I believe, are on the bottom of page 7 of your notes. So go ahead and write this material in right here, and write this stuff in on the bottom of page 7, and then we'll talk about what each of these dispersion patterns mean. The first dispersion pattern we're going to look at is uniform. And for uniform dispersion, it's pretty simple. What we see is that the organisms are arranged in a way that is the same or uniform. The distances between them are very, very similar. So if you were looking at them from above, you would see a pattern much like this. Now, this is always related to competition. You should make a little note of that. This is always related to competition. You have, in this example, these are the nests of flamingos. You can see a couple of them. You can actually see the eggs remaining. The nests are all about the same distance apart, and the reason why they are that distance is because that's basically the distance at which one flamingo sitting on a nest cannot reach out and peck its neighbor on the next nest. So they have just enough space, essentially, that they're feeling good. They've got a little extra space between them and their neighbor. Here's another picture that shows something very similar. All these birds sitting on their nests, just a little bit of space between them. Another uniform dispersion pattern. And one more with the uniform dispersion pattern of, related to nest building. We see this with penguins, obviously. Another classic example is this one. I believe this will be the one that will be mentioned on your exam. The spotted knapweed plant is a plant that does something kind of interesting. Its roots actually release a herbicide, a chemical that kills herbs or plants. And that actually, so if this is the plant, it's releasing this herbicide, doesn't kill itself, but kills other, plants. And so that will keep other plants from growing in that area. And so you can imagine if you're looking at this area of spotted knapweed from above, like in a helicopter, you'd see a, dispersion pattern like this, where you have one plant and there's a little bit of a space, and then there's the next plant, and the next plant. And of course, that's also competition. In this case, they were competing for light. The last example, they were competing for nest space. Here, they're competing, the plant's competing for light. So both of those examples are really good ones for uniform dispersion. Probably the easiest dispersion pattern to understand is clump dispersion. We see this all the time in nature. Clump dispersion, like the herds that you see in this picture of, in this case, wildebeest, clump dispersion is all for protection. So just like uniform was for competition, clump dispersion is a result of these animals seeking protection. So you'd be walking through the African savanna and see no wildebeest at all. You come over a hillside and all of a sudden you're looking at most of the wildebeest on the planet living in this one area at this one time, and the reason that they're there is just for protection from predators, things that are going to try to eat them. And we see that a lot both on land and in the ocean. Okay, so we see fish doing the same thing. Now, sometimes students wonder, well, wait a minute, it's not a perfect system. Animals that are in herds still get eaten, right? Like this one, all these ones running off like, they got Carl. But that one wildebeest, it's not going to work out so well for him. But realistically, of course, if this one wildebeest had been off on its own, it probably would have been eaten a long, long time ago. Living in the herd does increase your likelihood of being safe. The last dispersion pattern is random dispersion, and it is, shockingly enough, completely random. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's, simply where the organism is. And, probably the best example for this are simply, plants. Plants that, have their seeds blowing in the wind. They cannot control, they have no active control really of where those seeds land. It's just wherever the, wind pattern takes them. And so even though they're all originating from this, one original source here where this flower was, all these seeds are going to take off, and, it's kind of a beautiful example actually of chaos theory in mathematics. Just tiny variations in their initial starting condition are going to lead potentially to really dramatic differences in where they land. Those of you that followed that, way to go, math people. If you're confused, no big deal. The main thing is that you understand that where these things land is random. So that completes your video on dispersion patterns. Hope that was helpful.